All right. Good morning, everyone. And first and foremost, thank you all for taking the time out of your day to attend this meeting. It is the most current installment of our Storage for the Software Seller series. And today's conversation is going to be around Storage Defender and its role in the larger data resilience, data security conversation, which is a conversation that we probably are having on a regular basis with all of our, most or all of our customers these days. I am joined by my sales counterpart, Lauren Young. She'll be kind of monitoring and moderating the chat portion of this. So my ask here is that if while we're on the presentation, if you would all go on mute, or Lauren, you should be able to do that as well, and put your questions in chat, and Lauren will tap me on the shoulder if anything comes up that's relevant to what we're currently talking about. Otherwise, we'll probably defer answers to the Q&A at the end of the call. So please, if you've got any questions here, put them in the chat. Lauren will be watching and she'll let me know if I need to know it. Beyond that, I want to just dive right in, and because this is a conversation that really has a lot of moving parts to it, well beyond the Defender conversation. But we're going to talk about this and what is a really good course of action for you folks as sellers for the rest of this year at the absolute minimum and hopefully well beyond. So here we go. We're going to talk about the various topics here, and we're going to start by framing the data resiliency conversation. What's the fish tank that we're playing in here? And it's actually a bit of a pun. You'll see why in a minute. But what exactly is the larger conversation? What are the things we want to make sure that our customers are aware of? Then we want to talk about this concept of defining a minimum viable company. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that here, but we'll talk about why that's such an important element of the Defender story. The next conversation will be about performing a cyber assessment. And if you guys aren't doing this with each and every one of your customers, we're going to give you some really good reasons why you want to think about that and do it sooner rather than later. Because there's some pretty good money out there, both before and after the sale, that can land in your pockets as sellers. So we'll talk about that. Then we'll get down to the value of Defender itself. How does it meld itself into this conversation? And how does it kind of become one of the driving elements of determining whether our customers can answer positively the question, am I ready for a cyber event? And then lastly, but certainly not least, compensation dictates behavior. I've heard that somewhere. How do I make money doing this, selling this stuff? So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. All right, so we're going to go right into this. And again, if you've got any questions, Lauren's watching the chat. All right, the first part of the conversation I want to have with you folks is this segregation of the different pieces of the cyber readiness story. Right, one size is not fitting all here. Cybersecurity, as we know, is sort of like the shield out in front of the company. So it's out there like a searchlight, scanning the perimeter, watching for potential incursions, and feeding that information to a central repository that then correlates that data. Because if you know tools like this, like SIEM tools for event management, they chatter. They produce a ton of information, and that is not what we want bubbled up for action. We want to be able to go out and correlate these events and create what is called in that space a high fidelity event, something that has a high level of likelihood of being something real, something that is something we want to make sure we're taking an action on. And that's kind of the role of cybersecurity. It's kind of out there trying to stop those bad actors from getting in. In a perfect world, it's 100% effective. We never have to talk about anything else. Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. So then we turn to the element of cyber resiliency, which is if cybersecurity is the shield, Cyber resiliency is the safety net. All right, it is out there to say, okay, someone got through. They've been in our environment for some amount of time and done some damage. How are we going to handle that? And how are we going to get ourselves ready to handle that while the sun is shining? Because when the storm comes, it's going to be chaos. And if we haven't got these things thought out ahead of time, then we're going to experience major pain. So cyber resiliency is the whole family of solutions that are designed to make the recovery and the return to operational stability as quick and as painless as can be reasonably expected here. And we're going to spend some time talking about that today. Now, lots and lots of reasons why our customers want to be thinking about this, and they're all in newspapers and they're all on the news web pages and so on and so forth. I do want to spend just a minute. Normally I kind of gloss over these, but there's a lot of really interesting points on this slide. We see that cyber attacks in 2021 were double those of 2020. In 2022, they were double again. And in 2023, so far, they've been 2.5 times more prevalent. The point being here, this is not an isolated situation. It's really becoming an industry. And when you think about the fact that in many cases, these activities are being state sponsored, and we don't need to name individual countries. I think you guys already know some of that stuff. There's a lot of very scary activity going out there, and it's eventually going to hit our clients at some point. And the cost of that to the customer is going to way outstrip the cost of a solution now. All right. Half of those attacks are either ransomware, i.e., I'm restricting your access to the data, give me money or you're never going to see it again, or destructive, I don't care. I'm coming in with a scorched earth strategy. In either one of those things, they can be highly painful, they can be crippling, they can be fatal to a business, and we have real world examples of all of that stuff. 26% of customers that pay the ransom, and this is another point. These ransomware bad guys, they're not necessarily data people. It's not their job to keep the integrity of the data intact. So once they release the keys, some of that stuff may not even be recoverable. So they spent the money, they didn't get their data back. All right. And this last one is very eye-opening, I think. This 108 days faster identification and containment of a breach with the tools that give you the ability to do that. But think about what that means. 108 days less for the event. That implies that these bad actors are in our environments for a very long time, potentially, before we know something bad is happening. And by that point, they have installed backdoors, and they have put in place malware, and they've got all kinds of mischief going on in your environment that you're then going to have to go back forensically and clean up. So it's a very, very big conversation for our customers these days. The nice thing, if there is a nice thing about it, is there's not a single customer that you presently work with that's not thinking about this, that's not having conversations about how do I protect myself. And they may have varying levels of aggressiveness on it as far as exactly how they're handling that. Now here's the money conversation, and that's the real thing here. All right, 58% of costs that are continuing to be accrued after a year following a cyber event. So it is a gift that keeps on giving. And as a result, 57% of organizations report that they had to increase costs of products and solutions to try to recoup the costs incurred during a cyber event. So that means we, the consumer, are equally impacted by their lack of attention to their data integrity. Finally, this big guy in the middle is an interesting one. $5 million is the average cost, annual cost per cyber attack. Now that number is a global number. The United States number is closer to 10 million per attack. So it is a very expensive problem. So when we start going and talking about solutions, even our most expensive solutions will be a drop in the bucket compared to what these folks are incurring on this. And we also need to consider the fact that more and more regulatory bodies are getting involved in this. Customers are being impacted by lax policies in the area of cyber readiness. And the regulatory bodies are coming in saying you have to prove reasonably and plausibly that you have put solutions in place to keep that from happening, or we're going to fine you. And that's going to be happening more and more and more as these attacks ramp up and up. So that's the world our customers are playing in. So we're not going to have, oh, gee, have you ever thought about cybersecurity? That conversation is way past, due at this point. So we can confidently go in and know they want to talk about this. And the other thing is we want to come in to this conversation with this framework. We do not want to come in and say, hey, guess what? We've got a really cool new backup tool that we want to tell you about. That's not going to fly. Stay on this level. You're going to be way down the road before you start talking about specific solutions in this engagement with your customers. Okay, so then the question becomes, with all of that stuff in mind, we talk to our customer and say, what about you? Are you ready? Are you ready from a security perspective? Are you ready from a data protection perspective? And why? How do you come to arrive at the answer that you give me? Is it just, we're pretty sure? We've got tapes off site, we know we can recover? Is it any of those pantheon of answers that we will get from customers? In which case, our answer might be, gosh, you may really want to look at this in a more prescriptive way. And we're going to talk in just a minute about how we can help them do that with an IBM. I really don't like that we call it an IBM cyber resiliency assessment, because there really is no deliverable inside the assessment that we create that has IBM stamps on it. There's not going to be mention of any solution at all, much less an IBM solution, in the material that they get. We'll talk more about that in a minute as well. But the point being is that we want to put that question straight to our customers and then talk about, okay, let's do something that's going to kind of lay it all out in very stark terms, where you presently stand, where you're well prepared, where you are not for a cyber event. Okay, so now this slide is one that's been in the Defender decks for a while, so you may have heard this story already, but I do want to kind of go through it, because every single piece of this is absolutely crucial to a successful creation of a cyber response situation. So let's start from the bottom and work up. We already know the table stakes. Table stakes are foundational security elements and data protection elements. All of our customers are going to already have something in place in this space. So we're talking about the event management with rules that are meaningful, that will take those events that are incurred and turn them into actionable items that can be used to protect the business. Further, I've got various ability to make copies of my data. Are those copies of a sort that leave me in a situation to recover at the shortest amount of time? And that involves a stark conversation about the classification of our data, because we don't want to treat all data as the same thing. All right, it needs to be managed independently depending on its value. It needs to be, data placement is a big part of that conversation. In other words, if I've got volumes that have a mishmash of tier 1 data, tier 2 data that doesn't even matter, and it's all living on one volume, the ability to have discrete actions as far as recoverability is impaired. So that conversation needs to happen. Once we get there, then we start getting into the good stuff that kind of changes the game. First things first, immutability. For a lot of customers these days, immutability, in other words, inability to write to whatever protection we're doing, means tape. Make a bunch of tapes, stick them in a bunch of boxes, put them in a bunch of trucks, and send them off site. I'm immutable, right? Maybe so, but by the strictest definition, sure. But am I ready for rapid recovery in that model all by itself? Oh no. That is going to be an extremely painful experience if we're relying on that as the source of our recoverability efforts. So we need to talk about that conversation, isolating the data. Sometimes the isolation is physical, sometimes the isolation is logical. Bottom line is it in a place that the bad guys can't see, can't get at? And that's really that part of that conversation. Then we add to that all of the more proactive elements of this conversation, the discovery element. Let's be watching for anomalies on both ends. We can do this on the storage side. We can do it on the security side. We can be watching for unusual activity, and then we can proactively be validating our protected copies to make sure that they are not infected. And that, once again, that's a preview of a conversation we're going to have in a minute. But that's where we need to be. We need to be in that situation where we're not just saying backups are good enough, because they are not. If we're simply relying on backup alone, no matter what that backup is, whether it's a snapshot or a traditional backup, whatever, that is not good enough by itself. We need to be more proactive than that. Now, we get to the recovery element of this. And this is absolutely crucial to this story. If I have not had a very extensive conversation about what constitutes a minimum viable company, that is to say, the pieces of the business that are going to cost me the most money and the most pain to me and my customers, and I'm not treating that data in a special, unique way to give me the ability to recover rapidly, then I'm not ready for a cyber attack. Then I need to have a second conversation about, okay, what about the rest of it? It's not binary. It's not, just the minimum viable company and the rest. There could be multiple tiers. In other words, stuff I need back, I know I need back in hours or even minutes if possible. Stuff I need back in a day or two. Stuff I need back in a week. Stuff that can wait for 3 weeks. That kind of thing. We need to have that conversation and build the results of that conversation into a process. And then finally, all of these things up till now, for the most part, they've kind of existed. There have been solutions that will do this stuff. All right. The question is, how do I automate that? That is the secret sauce that makes this real for our customers, because we all know that all these lovely little nicely lined up colored boxes, are all doable things, but they require massive effort to do in a human-centric model. So now I need to be able to orchestrate my responses and my validation so that I'm not having to have a person that's heavily involved with this all day, every day. All of these elements are crucial to building a viable recovery environment for my customer. And the nice thing is that almost every piece of this has a solution associated with it. In many cases, the customer will have one. In many cases, they're going to need one. And that's where you guys come in. Now, inside of Storage Defender, all of this stuff is either incorporated into it or directly integrated with, so that we can manage all of this. We're kind of the traffic cop of all of this on a day-to-day basis. That's where Defender is the value add here. It's the new kid on the block, and it's going to give high levels of visibility into exactly what it is doing, because more and more companies are sort of tapping a person or a group on the shoulder saying, I need you to be able to regularly provide me with reports that show what our current cyber posture is. Defender will be that single source of truth going forward for our customers. So that's the value added Defender in this whole story. Okay, let me take a breath. Anything in the chat? Any questions? Any observations at this point? Okay.
Nothing in the chat, but if anyone wants to come off mute and ask a question, feel free.
All right. So we're going to keep going on this then. And now we're going to talk about how we define a minimum viable company. And we're going to do that using a use case that has recently been in the news, and you guys have all heard about this. Okay. Before we talk about that, we need to be able to go in and say which operations, which databases, which services are required. If I get hit and I cannot access my data, what do I need to get back to operational stability? Those identified elements need to will become what is defined as a minimum viable company. All right. Good example of that where somebody did this effort and they didn't think of a part of a crucial part of it. They went through the exercise of doing minimum viable company. They were able to get to the point where they were able to restore all of their data in a disaster, but one of the elements that they didn't put in their minimum viable company was the authentication system. So all their data was back. It was beautiful, ready to go, and nobody could access it because nobody could log in. It's that level of depth that we need to have conversations, and we're going to be involved. We're going to be that trusted advisor helping with this minimum viable company conversation, hopefully. And we'll be able to use the cyber assessment as kind of the roadmap for that conversation. Now, all of you have heard back in September and actually a little bit before that, um, the issues that a couple of casinos had with data breaches. MGM Resorts, it was actually while IBM was out in Las Vegas doing their tech exchange event, they incurred a cyber event. They lost access to everything. Their ATMs were down, their gaming systems were down. Is that an all hands on deck situation for a casino? Yeah. Checking in and out was impossible. They were using paper to write down things for, oh, you're coming in, you're leaving, et cetera, et cetera. The whole booking system was down. Their website was down. The locks to the guest rooms were inaccessible, so they had to have runners on each floor letting people into their rooms. Was that an aggravation? And MGM published that they expect that the overall loss on this is going to be around $100 million for this incursion. Now, Caesars had a similar type of event. They were less forthcoming with information, but they did report, because they were required to, that they had a breach, and the ransomware, the attackers were saying, we are going to lock all of your guests out of their rooms if you do not pay this ransom. And they paid millions and millions of dollars for that ransom. I thought a very interesting sub point there. And it kind of makes a point about just how hard it is to protect against incursions. The point of access that the cyber hackers used was a sensor in a newly installed fish tank that it had all kinds of smart capabilities as far as salinity and feeding and all of those different things. And apparently it was the way that the bad actors got into Caesar's environment. Can you imagine that? It's a very, very difficult thing that we're trying to do here. So we need to be very proactive about it as far as these conversations with our customers. Okay, so those are specific examples. Let's kind of back off a step and say, let's use casinos as our use case. All right, we come into that use case and we can easily, from the newspaper, newspaper, is that an obsolete term anymore? I don't know. How many newspapers are there left in the world? But anyway, our primary workloads, the ones that need to be on that list, that short list of, we need them back right away because it's creating immediate and intense pain for the business. Things like the front desk, all of their operations, so that guests can get in and out and do all the things they need to do. The gaming piece, my goodness, and the ATMs. It's great if okay, my blackjack doesn't require a computer in the strictest sense, although in a lot of cases they do. But if my customers can't get money, then they can't gamble. That's a problem. Now, I kind of spitballed a couple of secondary operations. So if the housekeeping group has an online scheduling and communication mechanism, okay, that's painful, but probably somewhat less painful. They probably did that on, with phone calls and paper before then. They probably can do that way for a few days or a week. The concierge service, I don't know about you guys. When I go to a hotel, the concierge is never there anyway. But that system probably can be down for a couple of days without the world coming apart. So they might be a potential example of secondary workloads. Okay, so um, let's kind of keep this in mind and play this story out. And this will define the value of Defender, what we're about to go through here. Okay, so let's start with the workloads at a high level. Basically, any workloads are fair game as part of this conversation. Databases, unstructured data, VMware environments, containers, cloud environments, they're all part of this story. And all of these have some sort of back-ended storage happening either on-prem in the cloud or some hybrid of the two. And they constitute my primary workloads. So I want to kind of have those as reasonably topologically isolated as I can so I can treat them with specific actions that are independent of the actions I might take on the rest of the data environment. So that's part of the conversation here. Okay, so on that, I'm doing regular inline data corruption detection. So I'm actively looking at that as a primary active workload. Now, let's get into the secondary operations. This primary workload, then, we will take regular immutable copies of this data, and we will store that information on box, on the array, to give myself the fastest possible time for recovery. So obviously that has implications. That's part of a conversation that you want to have with your customer. Generally speaking, that's an exercise you're going to go through and figure out the specifics with a customer. But as a rule of thumb, roughly 20% additional capacity is typically needed, give or take, to be able to give this immediate recovery on box capability to our customers. So there's going to be a little bit of a capacity bump on our primary arrays as a result of this operation. I am going to scan these copies, make sure they're in good shape, and we're going to talk more about that in just a second. And here's all our primary workloads living on that data. Now, I can do the exact same thing with my next tier of data. I can do those immutable snapshots, but maybe that stuff, it's okay if it's a day or two or three before it comes back. I'm going to put that stuff somewhere other, in a somewhere less expensive location. I may put it in nearline storage. I may put it on the cloud or in the cloud, maybe on some tape if it's a much lower priority item, that sort of thing. But the point being is I've got a lot of options as far as the destination for these protected copies. I can use this methodology all over the place and triage according to how I want to recover. And of course, traditional backup is never out of the picture here. It is always the line of last defense. So all of your different, the customer's different backup tools they've already got in place are definitely part of this reporting structure that all feeds up to Defender, because we want to know all of our avenues of recoverability in this story. So now, and that's where my secondary workloads are living down here. Now here's the other part. All right, some customers already have this, some kind of sort of have it, and some don't. I need to establish this clean room environment, because the key here to a successful recovery is regularly, automatically, systematically validating my data that it is in fact a recoverable copy. All right, because keep in mind, we don't know when the bad guys are going to come through the door, and in many cases that is weeks and even months before any sort of disruptive action is detected. So I need to have this clean room. I need to be scanning for malware. I need to be doing all the application database specific things that allow me to validate that indeed I do have a clean copy that can be the basis for recovery. An absolutely crucial element of this. And this can be a very labor intensive thing. So there's a combination of tools. I've got the Predator logo in here. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Predator. It is one of the leading solutions, and it's a very nice, cost-effective solution that can be acquired on the IBM software catalog. So it's a technology partner that provides it, but we sell it. and so can you, and make money from it. It is a big element of putting that clean room in effect. And other than that, there can be services involved. There can be just, we develop a run book to validate that immutable copy to make sure that I can recover from it. Okay, that has to do with all of the data gets run through that clean room. And then once I've done that, once the event actually happens, I can do the restore from those immutable copies because I've made sure that they are indeed what they need to be. Now, okay, let's take this model and play out a cyber attack. First things first, let's look at what happens if I don't have this in place. Okay, so here I have my production workload. I'm taking my snapshots. I'm taking my backups the way I normally do. I haven't done any of this other stuff, and boom, bad guy gets in. All right, maybe they've been in for 6 months. And what are they doing before they let you know that they're in there? They're wreaking havoc. They're putting in backdoors. They're uploading malware. They're doing all kinds of vicious, nasty things in your environment. And the very first thing they're going to do is go for the backups. Right? They know that once they hit your primary storage, the first thing you're going to do is, where are the backups? If they've already corrupted that and made those unrecoverable, and then that information gets into their primary storage, and you start losing data or losing access to data, whatever the particular nature of the incursion is, you're stuck at that point. You don't have backups that you can come back from. Now, all of a sudden, all of your production workloads are inaccessible. They're corrupt. They're destroyed. Whatever this particular bad actor did, and you, Mr. Customer, are writing a check. And then when you write the check, it's anybody's guess whether you're going to actually get your data back. Not a good story, and the cause for a lot of pain. It can cripple the business. It can put you out of business, and there are no shortage of stories of situations like this where it was fatal to businesses. I know that my good friend Rick Halsaver likes to tell a story about a dry cleaning shop that went out of business because of this. They just couldn't get their customer information back. They didn't have the money to pay the ransom. They were done. And that kind of highlights, if a dry cleaning store is a valid target, your customer is definitely one. Right? If they have money that can be extorted by a bad actor, they are in play here. Okay, now let's flip the story to when we've got the process in place and we've got a minimum viable company defined. First things first, I've got all of this corruption detection that's happening, but while the sun is shining, making sure that I have absolutely minimized my exposure to potential incursions. Now, it's not foolproof. If it was, we wouldn't be seeing all these stories, because all of these customers that got hit, they've all got security solutions. And they're all working really hard to make sure that they're keeping folks out, but there's all sorts of different ways people can get in. So in the meantime, we're doing this, and we've got my clean room operation going. So I'm looking at my snapshots, I'm validating that data, I'm giving that the good old green check mark and saying this is a good copy to recover from. Now, bad guy comes in and starts doing bad things to my production workload. I've got my security, my event management tool that's making that becomes aware of that. All right, and it goes out and sends an event to my SOAR playbook. So my automation and orchestration and response playbook kicks in. It requests the action to first isolate that workload. Okay, let's not let that spread. All right, now we want to go out and identify the most current clean copy that we've got. So it goes through the clean room. It looks at the most recent snapshot that was taken. Maybe I haven't validated that one yet. All right, and I find that he my first most recent snapshot happened after the incursion or the event, and it is also corrupt. So I now go back to my next snapshot and I find out, okay, that's a validated copy. We made sure that this one did not have whatever infection, and then that becomes the basis for recovery. Right? I restore the corrupted portion of it. I kick into data forensics mode to make sure I understand what happened here, right? So that I can protect against it in the future. But in the meantime, the business is back to standard, stable operations, and away we go. That's the goal. Now, this is a pretty little slide that's like, oh, this all happened in 3 mouse clicks. It's all good. There's a lot of work that is involved in getting to this state with our customers. So we need to be very, very diligent with how we do this. But the point being is that's what this Defender story is all about, is orchestrating and being the tool that tells us if we're ready for this and how we act and how we respond when an incursion happens. Okay. All right. These I'm not going to spend a lot of time with. The point here being is that the time spent by a bad actor in your environment is much, much more extended than most people realize. And one of the main purposes of an effective cyber response solution, or family of solutions really, is to minimize the amount of time they can be in there and be undetected, minimize the amount of time it takes to identify whatever they did, and minimize the amount of time if they kick off an event to get back to recoverability. That applies both to primary workloads and to secondary workloads. So we want to do this in all of these cases so that hopefully in a very short number of days, it's like it didn't happen. And in a very short number of hours and hopefully even minutes, the primary workloads, if affected, are recovered. That's the idea here. This is the conversation you want to be having with your customers. Now, okay, in a lot of these decks, we have this conversation about a cyber assessment as like the last slide in the last 37 seconds of the presentation. And I kind of wanted to escalate this and elevate it to a more important element of this conversation, because you guys are absolutely nuts if you're not doing this with every one of your customers. And let me show you why. Okay. First things first, this is not an IBM assessment that's going to spit out a bunch of IBM solutions that they should do, that they should implement as a result of their assessment. It's not what this is. This is a industry standards. So NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's their assessment, and it categorizes the various elements of a healthy cyber posture, and it breaks it down into its subcomponents so that the report that spits out from this can give you a very detailed response on, okay, you're really good at this and this and this, but you probably need some additional work here and here and here. Okay, it is something that requires a couple of hours. Typically, some folks will go on site. You can do it on the phone, of course, but sometimes it's an opportunity to kind of get to know your customers. And as sellers, one of the things I say a lot is the activity of selling is the activity of finding quality at bats with our customers. And this is a very high quality at bat, because you're going to do something that is free. You can't talk us down from that price. It's first things first, it's free. Secondly, it's going to give them a wealth of information about their current cyber posture, with an investment of a couple of hours of a couple of people's times. Any one person might have a half hour commitment in this. There's probably 3 or 4 people that get involved in accumulating the data that's necessary for creating one of these reports. It includes all of your storage elements, security elements, infrastructure elements. It is entirely vendor agnostic, and that's good and bad. It's good for the customer so that it doesn't come off as a sales pitch, right? Sometimes it's bad for the partner because they look at these things and they say, okay, great, we've got this really cool color-coded report. What do I do now? All right, we'll talk about that in just a second. And it identifies all your strengths and weaknesses and makes recommendations. This link, and you'll have access to this deck after the fact, will allow you to schedule an assessment, which I hope you guys are going to run out and do with a lot of your customers before the end of the year. But here we go. All right, this is the next piece of this. This is something that one of our above region people, a fellow by the name of Chris Vollmer, absolutely brilliant gentleman, created this sort of color wheel that helps interpret the CRAT cyber resiliency assessment tool results and turn it into action items. So this is what comes out of the various pieces of this. But you'll notice, once again, there's no mention whatsoever about solutions, IBM solutions that plug in to these recommendations. That's going to be problematic. I may, in my particular specialty, I may not know all the solutions, even if presented by name, what they are. But at least now, so I took one chunk of this. This exists. This color wheel exists for the entire spectrum here. But now I've got these elements, and I can plug in the IBM solutions that address those things. So I can figure out, okay, you can play the game of got it, need it, got it, that kind of thing, and figure out where their holes are as far as solutions that are missing from their overall cyber story. And then you've got the basis for future conversations. Is this not all by itself? I'm going to tell you more cool things about assessments, but by itself, if you've got a piece of paper that gives you a blueprint in conjunction with this guy, what am I next talking to my customers about to get them into the best possible posture? And oh, by the way, making a few nice sales with the customer in the meantime. Is that not a valuable asset to you as a seller? Go do this. It makes so much sense. Now, okay, I think I put it down. So I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit here because I put obviously in the wrong place. This guy here. All right. Oh, I know why it's here. But anyway, if you're not familiar with this, IBM is running a promotion through the end of this year and hopefully beyond, but we'll see, called Propose and Earn and Sell and Earn. So the Sell and Earn piece says, I got to get a sale done to get the money. But notice that Defender is in there, and you get $250 for every 10K of Defender that is sold. Now, that's great, but we're in the middle of October. Can I get that done before the end of the year? Maybe not. I suspect there'll be something like this in 2024 because we want to keep the momentum going here. But this is what it is right now. If you can get it done, great. All right. And these payments take the form of prepaid MasterCards. So actually, hey, Lauren, you want to jump in on this? Kind of be brief on it because I'm getting a little tight on time, but just want to spend 2 or 3 minutes talking about this bad boy.
Yeah, sure. So as kind of Doug said, this is part of our storage rewards. There are 2 parts, propose and earn. This is a pre-sales incentive, where if you have a client meeting in person or virtual around IBM Flash, Scale, Fusion, or Defender, when we say a FIE, First in Enterprise, that is a client or prospect who has not purchased IBM before for any of those products in the last 36 months. So just by having a meeting, you can get $1,000 spiff. And then from there, if you turn that into any sort of assessment, a CRAT being one of them, you are eligible for an additional $1,000. So that would be $2,000 before the deal is even won. And then the sell and earn, kind of as Doug said, is after the sale has been made. You can kind of see here there's different categories. So there's a category for Flash, Scale and Fusion, and then storage as a service. And then we also have an incentive for Brocade SAN when that is sold with Flash. Kind of the gotcha there is the SAN and the Flash do have to be on the same PO.
Okay.
That's storage rewards in a very quick nutshell. If you have questions, you want to know, get into it deeper, always feel free to reach out.
Right. And another element of this for my technical sellers out there is that when this is claimed, the seller or whoever claims can put a little checky box on that form that says split this between my seller and my technical seller. It's not mandatory, but
Great point.
there's a lot of folks that, this is a joint effort between the seller and the technical seller, and it'd be nice if we can share the love here. So you've got that ability to do that as part of this. All right. How many of you can use $2,000 in a gift card coming into Christmas? I would like it. I'll tell you what, kids are expensive, friends are expensive, money, gifts are expensive. Let's get some. And the other thing is it's going to give you such an insight into what's going on at your customer in areas that extend so far beyond Defender. Um, Absolutely, this is a vehicle for a great at bat with your customers and learning a lot about them and giving yourself some action items down the road. And I got to back up a little bit here. You didn't see that. You didn't see that. Okay. So the value of this conversation, this whole resiliency conversation, the value of Defender in that conversation. As we can see, this guy is going to be the single source of truth. And this is going to be a progressive story. Let's talk just a minute about where this solution is. What we're looking at is a mock-up of a dashboard for Storage Defender. This dashboard, strictly speaking, has not been released yet. What can I tell you about that? First, a couple things. The root of this dashboard is a solution that we acquired as part of our agreement with Cohesity. So this dashboard came from them. We got the source code. We are modifying it and adding functionality for the remainder of the various data feeds that are going to be needed as part of this. And version 2.0 of Defender, not a hard and fast delivery date that I'm aware of as it stands right now, but end of November is the target for the dashboard element of Defender. So did Doug just say don't sell Defender until the end of November? No. All right. First things first, we don't even really want to be talking heavily about Defender until we've got that cyber assessment output in our hands. That's step one. Go in, propose this thing, tell them, it's the free toaster that they get with every deal. It's going to give them a wealth of information, whether they never buy nickel one of IBM solution, they get that to keep. All right. Then we'll have a roadmap, and we'll be able to show our customers in no uncertain terms that they have exposures, and almost all of them will have some, and most will have sizable exposures that this report will point out, all lovely color coded as to the phase of the operation that needs some TLC. And then we've got that color wheel that will help you understand at that point which solutions, plural, that you'll be proposing, and Defender will most likely be one of those. But once you get through all of that, here we are on October 18th, that stuff's going to be available. It's going to be ready. There should be a demo living right around that time as well, so that we can take people in live to this and show them what it is. All right. And it is going to give our customers the closest to an overarching answer as to their cyber readiness of anything that they've got in their environment. All right. Right now, they would have to go to, probably dozens of different locations to call information, interpret it, and then try to, piece together something that a board or a CEO or a regulatory body will find acceptable. That's not an easy process. This is going to make that so much easier. All right. So the dashboard element of this is forthcoming in short order. Start having these conversations about resiliency and assessments now. All right. That's that piece. All right. So once again, all color coded. These are the elements of Storage Defender. We want to be able to automate. It is the tool via which automation happens. We want to be able to triage our recoveries. We want to be able to do that effective discovery and anomaly detection from both ends. We want to make this whole process as reasonably simple as we can. So yes, a lot of conversation needs to happen, a lot of decisions need to happen, but now we've got a receptacle to build all the output from those decisions into. So it makes things much simpler for the customer day to day to be able to manage that workload and understand where I've got problems, issues, that kind of thing. All right. This is obviously a team sport. All right. We're not going to do this by ourselves. These are the initial technology partners and the areas that they are going to be involved with Defender. And this list will just grow. All right. More and more. Most of our competitors have a RESTful API. So being able to pull in data relative to whatever those tools know will be something that we will be seeing more and more embedded into the Defender solution. That is the plan here. Openness is one of the key elements of Defender, and it's a key differentiator from a competitive perspective, because certainly the other guys are trying to build stuff like this, but a lot of it is very focused on them buying their stuff, and that's what will work with it. We are doing this in a very open context, so we should find that a lot of folks are going to be able to get great benefit out of this. Now, how do I make money? This is why the other slide was down here, Lauren, because this is about making money. First thing first, who am I talking to? If I go in and I start talking about a backup tool, all right, which is an element of what this does, all right, I lose, anybody with a C in their title starts checking email, all right? They don't want to talk about that. If I'm talking about cyber resiliency, that bubbles up to the highest levels in the organization and beyond, the people that they answer to. So you'll have much more likelihood of getting the ear of a higher level person if you're talking in terms of, we would love to come in and help you understand your current cyber posture. All right. So these are the different people, right down to the security admin, the storage admin, the IT management. These people all have stakes in the games. They're all being asked to answer questions that are difficult, and Defender will make them much, much easier. So all these people can help you on your path of getting to the right people to have the conversation with the decision makers. Okay. How do you build a configuration? I mean, we just looked at a bunch of very interesting but complex slides. It's like, oh man, how do I put that all together in a bid to a customer? First things first, this is a passport solution. So any of you software sellers out there, you can sell this and make money. I know there's some concern about, being able to sell hardware, that kind of thing, but this is all a software conversation. Now, it might very well drag hardware with you, which is great for the business, great for Converge, and good for the customer. But being able to very quickly go in with a point and click methodology to pick the pieces that we have identified that the customer might potentially need that wants to be part of a bid. And you end up with something that looks like this, very graphical. It's basically just asking at this point, what are the pieces, parts of your solution? And so it kind of lets you lay it out in a fairly simple way. And the unit of measure is resource units, which is very familiar to a software seller. I then take the output of this guy and feed it directly into SQO. And then I start talking about the quantities and the locations and all the things I need to build out a quote. Of course, I will want to have registered the deal so that I get my preferred quote with the preferred pricing on it. We know that whole story as part of Partner Plus, and away we go. So the first couple of times it might feel a little wonky. We're more than happy to help you with a walkthrough the first time you actually try to put a bid in for one of these bad boys. It's really not hard. It's all wizard driven. And once you get this part's way easy, and the rest of it is just SQO, and you guys are, software sellers at least, are familiar with SQO. So there's no issues there. Okay, we talked about this already. And just basically to close it out at this point, we are there. Data resilience is a universal topic. Cyber security, data protection, getting to a resilience status is what every customer wants to get to, and we can help them. One of the key elements of it is to put something in place that will make the answer to that question as easy as is reasonably possible, and that is what Defender is designed to do. I thank you all for your time. If there are any additional questions, as far as the, anything as far as features of the solution, I know we didn't really go too much into the specifics. This was kind of the positioning of the solution. We've got a couple of minutes left before we call this quits. Nothing in the chat, I assume, Lauren? No. All right, folks. I thank you very much. We will post this recording out on Box. So if you know of any of your colleagues that could not make this and would like to hear this material, it should be available, and the presentation as well with all the links to the demonstration and all those things will be available. So thank you all and have a great day.